Hello, everybody. This is Big Law, Lawrence Johnson, and welcome to Locked On Virginia Cavaliers podcast, your first place to come to get your Wahoo fix every day. Could the Wahoos have an early Christmas coming up? Today, I have Jacquie Fanciulli with me today from Wahoos 247. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Virginia, your daily podcast on the Virginia Cavaliers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Like I said, I'm back at it. Big Law, Jacquie Fanciulli in the building, on the air, here on Locked On. She is of Wahoos 247. Of course, the date is 12/21/2022. And today is pretty much like Christmas. And it has turned into a little bit of a Christmas miracle, I think, for the University of Virginia. But yes, before we get any further, let me go ahead and let Jacquie get on the mic here. Jacquie, how are you doing today?
Tired. Tired. I think that sums up how this signing period kind of ended. It was kind of like a little bit of a rush for Virginia. And not only did they have quite, the few weeks picking up a lot of commitments, but man, it was kind of like whiplash with a couple of these recruits that they were after. At one point, one of the commits looked like we were going to be on flip watch for signing day, and then bam, they boomerang right back, and Virginia was firmly the team to beat again. So it was quite the entertainment.
Well, I can tell you, this has been something of a huge concern for me, just for the simple fact that I really had no idea how this team and how this coach and how this staff would recover from not only the bad year, because there's been a ton of rumblings, which we can probably touch on here in a little bit, but also just the tragedy also compounding the issues of what's been going on. And if anybody doesn't know, if you're looking for the top person to follow on anything Virginia recruiting, please follow this young lady right here, Jacquie Fanciulli. So Jacquie, let everybody know where you're from, who you are, and what you do on the grounds here at the University of Virginia.
Yeah, sure. So I cover the Virginia athletics program, but a lot of it I do is covering the recruiting side. I do cover the team as well, football and basketball, but I do cover a lot of the recruiting. So I cover for Wahoos 24/7, so it's part of the 24/7 Sports Network. So a lot of people come up to me and they say, "I know you from Twitter." That's probably where you know me from. I usually tweet. My husband says I live on Twitter with a lot of updates. So yeah, so my job entails interviewing recruits, trying to figure out who's trending towards Virginia, who's trending away from Virginia. With the transfer portal, trying to figure out which targets UVA is after. Coach Elliott and his staff have very meticulous thought process when it comes to how they handle recruitments. They don't really cast a wide net when it comes to offers. So when you're looking at them, you tend to not know when a kid is on their board until they are offered and possibly even commit in the next week or so. So we try our best to work our sources to kind of figure out which kids they're evaluating. So you get to know them like a couple months ahead of time rather than just kind of rush the process of here's an offer, they're going to commit.
It's almost like when they opened up the transfer portal, your workload probably doubled or tripled, based off of just having the recruiting, high school kids. All right, that's cool. That's cute. But then when they started opening up this transfer portal and you had to truly track, all the young men that want to come or leave, that just had to be just a daunting task for you moving forward here.
Yeah, so it's much different covering the portal than it is to cover a high school recruit, because most high school recruits will still publicly let you know when you have an offer through any other social media platforms. A lot of transfers like to keep the stuff kind of within themselves. They also don't like to talk about visits as much. So you're relying on your sources to let you know. So for instance, Kobe Pace, we've reported on visitors, and Kobe Pace, a Clemson running back transfer that committed and then signed his graduation paperwork that Virginia announced today. He was one that we had heard of a Clemson athlete visiting Virginia. Obviously, there's a couple of number. Obviously, there's one particular Clemson athlete that's currently in the transfer portal that might have been connected to Tony Elliott. So we had heard a Clemson athlete had visited. but we couldn't put like our finger on it. So we were kind of hunting and talking to sources, and we eventually found out it was Kobe Pace. So we knew they were wanting to add a running back. So we had our nose to the ground, but it took a long time to confirm that because Kobe wasn't talking. Obviously, Virginia wants to keep that visit quiet. So that's why we didn't really hear about it. We just knew bits and pieces. So it really is kind of like an investigative. You're kind of being a detective to try to figure out what's going on. And sometimes, a coach might see a player in person, but they're just still evaluating that guy because Tony Elliott needs to approve him. So sometimes even those are false flags. Sometimes you can talk to a guy for maybe a week or two, like linebacker Ryan Selig, who eventually ended up in Minnesota. Virginia was talking to him for a while, never offered because they felt they already had enough linebackers in this class, but they were interested just in case. So again, that's something that you just kind of have to kind of weed through all the noise and try to figure out what's what. And that's the difference between the portal, because not only programs are secretive, the guys in the portal are secretive. So, and then you get told so many things and you're just trying to figure out, okay, what's what.
So, when we're talking about players like Cody Pace, to me, it seems like he's officially the first Clemson person to come over with Tony.
Well, if you don't count the staff, if you don't count the staff that he brought over from Clemson, yeah, he's the first official player that has come from them, and it's shocking that it took this long for that to happen. But I think him and Dabo's relationship kind of prevented any other athlete to come along that quickly. I think just the fact that Kobe went into the portal by himself because of the deep running back room allowed this transition from one school to the other to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because that was something that I was questioning. I was like surprised that we haven't had many other or some just some Clemson Tigers come over and try to put their chops out here and see if they can transition with Coach Elliott coming over, being that there's a lot of high-end, high-quality players that are sitting, on the Clemson bench. But so let's do this. Let's kind of get into the recruits. Since this is National Recruiting Sign-Up Day, the first one, let's get into who committed out of the recruits and which recruits to really watch out for, some of the higher caliber ones as well.
Well, actually, on actual signing day, Virginia picked up two of their biggest signees. Cameron Robinson actually is the most highly rated guy on this class. He's a 4-star on 24/7 Sports. Now he's been committed to Virginia since the summer. Florida State and South Carolina came here late in the game, and they were trying to flip him. And honestly, last week after his Florida State official, we were monitoring if he was going to flip to FSU. And kudos to Virginia linebackers coach Clint Sintum. And yes, Tony Elliott and a lot of the staff and recruiting staff did well, but Clint Sintum was the main recruiter here. He was the primary guy, and he fought off FSU and an SEC program like South Carolina. And Cameron, as 30, 40 minutes ago, sent in his letter of intent and confirmed his commitment. And that's a huge win, because not only are you getting a 4-star, but you're getting the top 10 player in the state of Virginia, which they haven't done very much the last few years. So you're trying to cement that and take back the state. He's, lives an hour and a half from Charlottesville. So you want to keep those great players in state, not let them go away. And he's going to be a guy that could have an early impact on this team. And according to a source at Virginia, what they were telling him was, you were not recruiting you as one of the linebackers in this class. We're recruiting you as the guy. You're the dude. You're the guy we can build a program around. And that's how important Cameron Robinson is to this class. And then even today, they picked up another talented athlete, Sedarian Harrison, a slot receiver out of South Carolina. He's actually from Lavelle Davis's high school, Woodland High School in South Carolina. He committed today. Virginia won out against Louisville, Virginia Tech, Oklahoma. Again, a lot of good Power 5 offers there. And Sedarian's a very talented recruit. Des Kitchings was one of the first coaches to approach him back in the spring. That's his first visit to Virginia, was for the spring game. He picked up his offer in October, and then they quickly kind of propelled from there and got him on grounds for that first official visit weekend in December. And he's been silently committed since then. So it's been a while. So, And then he still was hearing from other schools, but Virginia was able to keep him too. So those are the top 2 recruits. But, if you go down the list, we're going to talk about some of the positions that they were able to gather. But, grabbing like a Miles Green out of Highland Springs, again, a school that you want to get into. These are the powerhouse programs in state that you want to have some representation. Virginia Tech obviously has always done a good job in that school to have a pipeline there. They've done a good job this year, but for Virginia to pick up Miles Green and hold on to him, that's a huge win. Kevin Downey, Coach Downey, defensive line coach, has done a good job in this cycle, really identifying the players early and securing them, just like Miles Green. And, especially in the defensive trenches, that was their strong suit in this class, picking up guys like St. Thomas Aquinas defensive tackle Jason Hammond, getting that pipeline going to St. Thomas Aquinas, picking up a UVA legacy into Kai Kirby. These are all important recruits. It might not show up in the rankings because, again, we knew coming into the season 23 was going to be hard for the staff because they were coming in such late in the game. When everyone else was recruiting 23s, they were still trying to recruit 22s on the offensive line in January and February and trying to fix that class because Elliott came in so late. So they were a couple months behind. Now 24 is a different story. So this is why we're going to judge them more on 24, but they did a good job closing in on some of the guys and picking up some of the guys that can help for the future, creating pipelines to St. Thomas Aquinas, to Highland Springs, getting some of those in-state guys to remain like a Cameron Robinson, who was a very integral recruit for the Cavaliers as far as like getting commitments on board, but also getting presence in the South, getting into Georgia, getting into Tennessee. Those were the talents are getting into Florida, getting into those private schools. Because I know a lot of people went after Bronco Mendenhall for going away from in-state. And I get it. You want to recruit in-state well. But you also need to know which prep schools nationally to attack and create a pipeline. A national, a state champion contender like St. Thomas Aquinas is a no-brainer. If you're able to get a pipeline going there in Fort Lauderdale, you're going to want to go there because not only do you know that they produce NFL caliber athletes, but they also have athletes that have great academic standing because that's what UVA needs to find. These high academic special athletes, and those athletes live in schools like St. Thomas Aquinas. So again, UVA is starting to get those relationships going, and that's why some of these guys on this particular class might not have those showy numbers as far as rankings goes, but it's just the beginning. And a lot of them do have raw talent as well.
Well, that's something that I was really monitoring myself. I was, trying to figure out, all right, if these young folks are coming up, these recruits are coming up, where are they coming from? And like you said about Bronco, he's a West Coast guy. So he was recruiting West Coast. He was recruiting, the Polynesian population as well, because that's what he's used to, out at BYU. But, like you said, being in the South, being in the hotbed, going towards the Panhandle as well. UVA has actually done well the last couple of years, and seems like they're still doing well in the South. So, like you said, in addition to trying to get your state signed up, going to the South is another way you also want to go to get your recruits. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and World Cup. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today to use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So yes, Jackie, as you were saying, and as you were, laying it down, and really kind of giving the blueprint, the plan, for this team as far as bringing in high schoolers. Was there any offensive lineman? Because to me, I look at it as almost like a double duty, to get offensive linemen, meaning it was a position, in my opinion, a position of weakness, and then you also needed to backfill with talent. And we lost, the entire line last year Then we have 3 more guys transferring out. How are we looking, as far as the offensive line, not before we get to the transfer portal, but from a high school recruit feel?
Well, for high school recruit, Virginia from the start of this class only wanted to bring in one offensive lineman. That's all they had space for. They only had space for one offensive lineman high school recruit. Now, if you look at it, they kind of stockpiled their O-line last year during the 22 cycle. They picked up plenty of offensive linemen. If you look, they had Dawson Alters, they had Houston Curry, they had Noah Demerit, they had Mikhail Boley.
Mikhail Boley, yeah.
Yeah, they had several O-linemen commit during that period, and they also had John Paul Flores as a grad transfer. Obviously, he's in the portal right now. So again, they tried to fill a lot of the youngsters in the last class. So in this class, they only had spot for one freshman. And moving forward, they're in the 23 because they're still going to recruit 23 guys because they still have the February National Signing Day. The numbers are pretty tight still on the O-line. Tony Elliott likes to have 15 linemen. Right now, he only has spots for 3 more. So you're going to see him go for 3 more, and this is where they're going to get more experienced guys. So they're not going to recruit any high schoolers moving forward. They're going to recruit from transfer portal. So his numbers are still pretty tight. I think a lot of people automatically assume that they're going to get more O-linemen, and I've had so many fights on our message boards about this. I was like, no, there's not numbers for that many linemen. For high schools, it was always just maybe one lineman. And then in the portal now, they were waiting to see who would stay, who would go. We found out that Jonathan Leach and Derek Devine are transitioning away from football. Obviously, Logan Taylor has entered the portal. John Paul Flores has entered the portal. They picked up one offensive lineman in the portal. So they want to get more. They probably want to get a tackle, a guard, and a center moving forward. So maybe 2 tackles. It's working those numbers, trying to figure out who's going to go where. Is Dawson Alter is going to be part of that center depth with how they pictured him before, kind of seeing where he goes. Is Noah Demerit going to be an offensive guard? So try to kind of see where those are, because right now they picked up Cole Serber, the offensive lineman at Patriot High School. He was actually the first commit out of the 23 class and first commit for Tony Elliott since his arrival. So Cole Serber, and he stayed committed even after 2J left a few weeks ago. And poor Cole Serber had his official visit, left on Sunday, and then a couple of hours later found out his O-line coach was no longer at the program. So he still remained committed, still committed to Tony Elliott, but he's going to be a guard. So moving forward now, they're trying to figure out which positions they need. They're going to reevaluate the O-line, and I imagine they're going to offer a few more guys. They offered one in the portal yesterday, Tuesday night. So now again, is just trying to see who's out there, but I don't expect huge numbers on the O-line, because even though they want 3 more, Tony Elliott specifically said during his press conference that you have to still get the right guys. They're not going to push for 3. So if they can't find 3, they're going to be okay. That's what he says. That's what he thinks. He's perfectly fine with what they're doing. So again, it feels like he's okay with like between 13 and 15 being ideal.
Okay, well, I can tell you, like you said, there's spaces for 3 offensive linemen, and like you said, getting guys who are field ready, is definitely I think should definitely be a focus, being that you lost 3 players who also had playing time. So as we talked about as the advent of the NIL and the transfer portal, some folks, are calling it the official beginning of college free agency. Let's just kind of jump into, the transfer portal as you were informing us on. So let's talk about who signed up. What players have committed to the University of Virginia? What schools are they from? I know we had a few, and who else could possibly be on the way?
So right now, Virginia has 4 transfer commitments. So you have Northwestern wide receiver transfer Malik Washington. He's going to be a slot wide receiver. Then you have, like I mentioned, Clemson running back Kobe Pace. He actually just committed on Tuesday night. And then obviously quarterback Tony Muskett. That's kind of the prize of the transfer class, as you would be. He's the, there's going to be competition at the quarterback position, but that's who you think is going to be QB1 heading into the spring. So he's, from Monmouth, but he's actually a Virginia native. And then there's offensive tackle Dejon Parker, who committed. Again, he was at that official visit when 2J was the coach. And then on Sunday, 2J stepped down and went to NC State. he said he's still committed, but I will say Iowa is still circling and there's other schools still circling for him. Now, the one thing I want to note is these 4 players were announced by Virginia. And there's a misconception about what that means when it comes to transfer. So when it comes to high schoolers, when a school announces them on signing day, that's because they signed a national letter of intent. A national letter of intent means that the athlete is bound to that school. So they're stuck to that program. But a transfer does not have to sign a national letter of intent. What they have to sign is a grant and aid. Prior to early signing day, that was a big thing for high school prospects to sign a grant and aid so they can enroll early in January before an early sign day even existed. Andrew Brown was one of those prospects that did do that under the Mike London era. So what does that mean? Grant and aid means that the transfers are not bound to that program, but that program is bound to the transfers. So, or whatever the high school prospect, which means that Musket, Washington, Pace, and Parker technically are Virginia Cavaliers. They were announced. But because of new transfer portal rules, they're able to visit another school between January 4th and January 8th. They're only locked into a program when they enroll. So they have till January 13th. That's the first day of enrollment at Virginia. They can enroll somewhere else technically. So I want to make sure people are aware that just because they were announced on Wednesday doesn't mean that they're completely locked in. I think they're mostly solid commitment, like 3 out of the 4. I'm perfectly fine. Dejon Parker, he says he's solid, and I think he is pretty solid. But when you have Iowa, Vandy, and a couple other schools talking to you, you're going to be monitoring him between January 4th and January 8th to make sure what's going on. Is he going to take another visit? Then Virginia is going to be doing that as well, because Virginia is going to want to have some visitors between January 4th and 8th because they still need guys. Like we mentioned, they're going to look for 3 offensive linemen. They also need to add at least 2 more corners. Their cornerback depth took a big hit. They lost Ventrell Sepras to the portal, and obviously Anthony Johnson graduated. So they're looking for 2 more. They wanted 4 corners in this class between high school prospects and transfers, and they only picked up 2. So they're going to want to add 2 more. So again, that's going to be for the transfer portal. So that's going to be the 2 positions that they're going to focus on, corner and offensive lineman moving forward. Obviously, you want to still recruit those transfer portal guys that you have, but also continue to recruit your own locker room, because until January 18th, they're allowed to go into the transfer portal. So Tony Elliott has done a good job this go around of securing some of those guys to return. He announced in the press conference that Aaron Famui is going to take advantage of that extra eligibility that they were given. So is Cam Butler. Antonio Clary is coming back. Cohen King is coming back. Chico Bennett is coming back. Who else is coming back? Grant Mish is coming back. Sackett Wood is coming back.
Wood.
Hunter Stewart's coming back. Josh Ahern's coming back. And I think that's everybody that he announced was coming back. So that's a good job for keeping those guys at home, because again, with the transfer portal, you're also recruiting the locker room. You're constantly recruiting that locker room. So that's good news for Virginia. So right now, that's your game plan. If you're Virginia at the portal, you're recruiting your guys to remain. You're recruiting the portal guys that are currently committed to your program, but you're also recruiting the positions of need, which is O-line and corner. And you're also recruiting 1 wide receiver target at the moment, because they also want to add 1 more wide receiver. And it's currently Eastern Kentucky wide receiver Jaden Higgins. He's one of their main targets at wideout. He visited last weekend. We've had him on commitment watch for a few days. He's also picked up more steam lately with a couple other schools looking at him. So we're kind of like, oh, should we take him off commitment watch because other schools are in it? But it was leaning towards Virginia quite heavily. So we're kind of monitoring that situation here. But so 1 wide receiver, 3 O-linemen, 2 corners are probably your wish list if you're Virginia in the portal.
So right now, of course, we have some all ACC players in the portal talking, or through their career. Brendan Armstrong, Ventrell Cypress, Nick Jackson. Is there any news on those? Because I don't think anyone from Virginia has committed to another school yet. Their names are just in the portal. Is there anyone, has any of the guys that are in the portal transferred to another school yet? Or is there the hope that maybe one in particular, I think Ventrell being like a top 5 player on pretty much every recruiting business is board. Being that there's no way he's coming back to Virginia. Maybe a Nick Jackson, which he's had actually, I guess, maybe has said that he's open to coming back. Of course, Brennan, he's gone. And we understand why, but kind of fill us in a little bit on some of that information.
Sure. So Ventrell Cypress is one that I get asked a lot about because people would love to have Ventrell back. He's not coming back. He's being recruited and courted by some of the best programs in the country.
Ohio State.
He visited UCLA, I believe, last weekend. He was at Florida State this weekend, and Florida State feels very confident in where they are at with him right now. And, like you said, Ohio State is another one that is really fighting for a visit. They're desperate for Ventrell to visit there. So he's not coming back. He wants to go to a program where he can get the national spotlight and he can develop into an NFL player. So that is his goal.
I call that the Olu. He's doing the Olu. He's doing the
Olu. So Ventrell Cypress is doing the Olu. Nick Jackson is an interesting one because even when we kind of reported that he had intentions into the portal, then a few hours later he did. The source that told us that also said that, what he said a couple hours later to the Richmond Dispatch is that he's still open to coming back and he's open to possibly go into the NFL draft as well. He's got different options that he is weighing. So that one is one that we can monitor a little bit. He did pick up a West Virginia offer. I haven't seen any movement of him visiting West Virginia, but that is a school that we know has offered him. Now, Brennan Armstrong is a interesting one because he took 2 visits last week. He went to Oklahoma State and he also visited Wisconsin. Wisconsin reached out to him like Monday of last week with the new head coach there. And then by Friday, they secured him. Now, they also picked up another quarterback commit, Nick Evers, also a transfer quarterback, but he's very young. So I think, talking to people, what they had hoped was they pick up Evers for the future of the program and they pick up Brennan Armstrong for the year. But Brennan still hasn't made the decision yet. Those are the only 2 visits he's had. But then you throw in kind of a fun little twist here with Robert and I and Coach 2J at NC State. Does he go there to a system that he's obviously very familiar with? So that's who we were watching for Brennan. Like I said earlier, the transfer portal transfer guys aren't restricted to signing today, tomorrow, and the day after, where it's the early signing day period. They can sign literally whenever from now to basically until they enroll in January. So basically they just have to show up at the school the first day of classes. That's how you guarantee your spot. So, so those are the schools that we've heard from Brennan. We had heard some earlier for Cincinnati. We had heard something like that. Obviously he's an Ohio native, so you can see him going back home. But yeah, I don't see Brennan coming back. Nick Jackson, there's more of a possibility, and Ventrell Cypress I don't see coming back. So it'll definitely be interesting to watch those 3 and where they end up.
Well, I can tell you, in the hearts of a lot of Wahoo fans, they're hoping that we have all of them. But, we can get 1 out of 3, that would have to be satisfactory based off of, what we have coming in this year. So now let's talk about some players who could potentially come to the University of Virginia that maybe not on everyone else's radar or information that you're privy to. Who could possibly make it to the University of Virginia that no one is really thinking about right now?
Well, that's the hard part of covering this staff. So this staff does not extend a wide net of offers. If you have an offer, you're committing. It's a committable offer right there and then. For instance, when they were looking for corners and safeties, they basically said, these are our only safety options. These are only corner options. If you have an offer, you can commit. So right now they have 2 cornerbacks with a current offer. They have J.J. Roberts from Wake Forest, and you have Alex Washington from Harvard. Those are their 2 cornerback targets. Those are their 2 top targets. So those 2 have committable offers. So if those 2 decide to go somewhere else, they go down the list to the next one. So like Tyreek Funderburk from Richmond, although he's trending to App State. So he's talked to UVA, but he's know that UVA is only possibly going to reach out after the holiday break when the dead period is lifted. So it's kind of like a gamble. He might commit to App State, which honestly he's from North Carolina. So I get it. He wants to go play closer to home. And App State's a good program. He's one of their former Richmond coaches, is now their cornerbacks and defensive passive coordinator. So he's familiar with them as well. So that is how Virginia approaches it. And a lot of it is they evaluate these athletes. So like Justin Sparrows and the scouting team finds these athletes, they evaluate them, they pass it along to the coaches. A lot of these coaches were on the road a lot. Like, my goodness, I think Coach 2J, before he left to go to NC State, was in 5 different states in one day. Same goes with Coach Elliott. So they're jumping off, going from high school prospect to transfer portal. They see these guys in person, and then they have to evaluate if they get an offer. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get moved down the list, and then they go, okay, this one's in person and we don't want right now. So it's a long, long process, and that's where I was telling you it's a little more about detective work to figure out where they are on the board. So it's hard to pinpoint. Apart from, like, for example, Jaden Higgins, we know that things are moving forward in that direction because we've confirmed he visited. We knew he was visiting last weekend. We knew the process. So a lot of it is you kind of follow what's going on in the portal. Like, they just offered this offensive lineman out of Southern Utah, Christy Nakano. He told me that he wants to visit Virginia in January, but he also named 4 other schools that also he wants to visit in January. Obviously, he can't visit 4 schools in 4 days when one of the school in the West Coast and one school is in the East Coast, and it's not possible. So he's going to trim down his list. So that's what Virginia is dealing with. It's that try to balance not offering too light so they can get a visit, and trying to evaluate these portal guys in person, and also figuring out if they have the credits necessary to make it into UVA, because that is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that they've had in the transfer portal, and has actually negated a few of their targets, because it's not about GPA. I think a lot of people think, oh, he's from Yale, he's able to get in here. He's from Stanford or Notre Dame, because they're high academic institutions. It's because of credits. So that's why they usually only go for grad transfers. They have to go into the graduate program, and that's how they get accepted. Or those that are really early in the process of your university degree, out of the first year, preferably the first year or the second year, because the main problem that UVA has is matching the classes that they come from a different program for different school and matching the credits at UVA. So you can possibly lose half of your credits bringing in from another program, which means you're in danger of becoming ineligible by the NCAA, and then you're kicked off the team. So you're basically bringing a kid in for failure, which is what happened to Philip Sims during his time period at Virginia. So, and it's hard. It's really hard on Virginia to recruit transfers. That's why when a lot of people say, like, Virginia should just recruit the portal, I say no. You cannot rely on the portal with the Virginia Cavaliers, because you just don't have that much of a pool to kind of recruit from. So you can do a Band-Aid approach. Like, Virginia was very efficient the last 2 cycles to see where they need to fill hole. It's a great Band-Aid approach. But long-term, high school is still your blood of your program, so your bloodline of the program to develop those athletes. So again, it's transfer portal for Virginia is really, really tough. So like, even like, for example, Taiwan Francis, he was one that they were recruiting since October, but unfortunately it didn't work out, that he couldn't make it in to Virginia. So again, it's a lot of different things that Virginia needs to do. So I can name you a name today, and by the time someone listens to this podcast on Friday, that person's off the board already. I don't know how many times I've updated. We have a transfer portal tracker that's on our tag, like kind of pinned on our board. I've updated that portal tracker maybe 10 times since December 5th, because you hear about a guy they're vetting, and then they're no longer on the board after they've gone through the vetting process, because either their academics are not lining up, or they go in there and they don't like their measurables, or they're like, actually, he's on our board, but this guy is more. For example, Tony Muskett, they had a couple quarterbacks ahead of him at that point, but then when they saw Tony Muskett, he went number 1. That was pretty quick. That was I will say, as soon as they offered Tony Muskett, they saw him, he automatically went up, and a lot of the older quarterbacks that I heard they were vetting moved down the list quite quickly. So it kind of like that. It's really is the meticulous process that this staff works through.
Well, Tony also kind of made a reference of National Signing Day is almost like the draft. He wants to build through the draft, and that's where they are. And of course, the recruiting, the national or the transfers are more like free agents. So, this is what we're here for, guys, and that's what she does. That's Jackie. giving you the knowledge, filling you in on what's going on behind the scenes when it comes to recruiting for the Virginia Cavaliers. Jacquie, let them know how they can get with you. Let them know how they can get some of your exclusive VIP content as well. You got to get on, everybody, because you'll be more informed and you'll sound smarter than everybody that you know.
Sure. Yeah, you can obviously find me on wahoos247.com. It's if you want to kind of join in, and you can get a free trial and see what kind of VIP content we have. We try to really focus in on getting the inside scoop behind the program. We try to give you a good idea of what's going on behind the scenes. One of my favorite things to do after National Signing Day in February is kind of going behind the curtain. So I give you a little glimpse of some tidbits that happened during the recruitment, and what exactly happened with Kamen Robinson when Florida State official visit, those type of things, because those are kind of fun things that I think fans really appreciate. But also, you get to know the athletes as well. That's one of the things that I like to do, is so that the student athletes, because they're people, not just players. So you get to know who they are, and get to know their personalities, especially the commits and recruits, because they're high schoolers and they're going through this process, or 17, 18-year-olds. Sometimes we talk to them when they're 15 and get them their first Power 5 offer. So that's what we do. And so you can find me on Wahoos 24/7 at JackieFran_ on Twitter. And then you can also find me on YouTube, because we also have the Good Old Podcast. So there's a lot of different ways you can hear about Virginia football.
Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on, and we have to do this more often, because there's just so much information out there. And then, of course, we got some basketball to catch up on as well.
Yes, it's been I will say, having that Virginia Miami game starting at 8:30, and then not only going to bed till 1, 2 in the morning, and having that 5 a.m. wake up call for those first national letters of intent rolling in at 7. It's a whirlwind 24 hours.
Absolutely. Not to mention the girls play tonight at 12-0 against Duke. So
That's right.
That's another one we got to monitor. But everybody, we love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. And I will be back tomorrow morning, and we'll get Jacquie back on here so she can educate us some more. But we want to thank you for making Locked On Virginia your first listen today. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Pete Butowski brings the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back, and Wahoo! Let's go, guys.